Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Culture Hour. I'm one of the founders, Shelley Smith, and my partner, Elizabeth Veliz, is on site doing her thing right now, so we will catch up with her on the next viewing. Today, I am absolutely thrilled and honored to introduce to you Karol Clark. Karol is a 5-time #1 best-selling author, which is pretty amazing, and hopefully we'll have time she can rattle off a few of those books for you today as well and tell you where you can get them. But she is the founder of the Weight Loss Practice Builder. And today, of course, we're talking all things culture. And but first, I want you to hear a little bit more about Karol. So Karol, take it away and let the audience know who you are and what you do.
Terrific, Shelley. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really someone who am a nurse by trade, and I help physicians add medical and surgical weight loss as well as retail into their practice, so they can increase their revenue, improve their patient outcomes, and have a lot of fun along the way. Because as you know, with any culture, at least the ones I've ever involved in, that's an important piece of it as well. You have to like what you're doing.
Absolutely. So people call on you for all kinds of diagnostics, obviously above and beyond or outside of the weight scope, to help them grow their practices. So tell us a little bit about maybe some common phone calls you get, or some common ailments that you see that you help folks with. And of course, I'm going to do my thing and tie it to the culture piece.
Sure thing. Well, one of the biggest things I get a question about from physicians is that they want to, particularly with bariatric surgeons, I work a lot with bariatric surgeons, and their biggest need is they want to add additional cases, additional patients to their practice. So a lot of it is how to attract patients and then how to work with them effectively to convert them into a surgery and appropriate treatment modality for them to help them lose weight. So usually I call and I say, what's the top 3 goals that you have? And it's like, more cases, more cases, more cases. More patients, more patients, more patients. So I help them from that perspective. And then along the way, I also get asked questions about various things, anything related to practice management, facility planning, how to add retail into practices, because the reality is it actually does help patient outcomes, especially when it comes to weight loss. And a lot of physicians are not trained in a lot of those things, and how to do it in a fun and engaging way with their patients. Those are probably the top things that I'm asked questions about.
What are some, if there are there any familiar hiccups and maybe you see from a front office to even be able to expand? Sometimes, you know, we want more, but when we get more, we grow too quickly. Our culture's not ready to handle it. So is there anything common that you see?
Absolutely. A lot of it has to do with, as they're expanding their practice, when physicians need to set themselves apart from the competition, the biggest thing that's going to do that for them, the biggest impact is going to be their staff, and it's really their frontline employees. And so we go back and we kind of talk a little bit about, okay, what sort of, I call it, I don't know what you call it, I kind of call it the vibe of their practice. Yeah. And the vibe is really a lot about their team and the systems or processes that they have in place. And then sort of what's their wow factor? What is it about them that makes them different from their competition? And that really has to come from the top down. And that's what also I think helps build your culture, because it's the vision of the person who's in charge that's going to guide that culture. So sometimes you have to get back down to those basics, and really the front team is really going to be critical to their long-term success for sure.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's definitely a common theme with, regardless of what industry I work with. Obviously, the staff is #1. We can have a vision of what we want the vibe. I like that. The vibe to be, the culture to be, the jam of the culture. But right. The reality is the people that are hired are going to make an impact and live up to whether that vibe is a reality or not. Is there anything that you see that are from a system, a process, or maybe a missing training or component? Are there any similarities that you see really between the practices that you help?
I think with a lot of practices, you get the same, you know, you see it in almost any workplace. You want to build that dream team, and along the way, there's lots of hiccups because there's lots of personalities at play. And so a lot of it's a matter of exactly what you do. I mean, you've used Shelley in some practices, and she's done a great job, but it's really about how to build that team. And when there's differences, how you can take those and smooth them out. And you really use because you don't want all the same type of employee. You don't want everyone with the same personality, because you want to have that interaction. Some people are better at at different things, and so they're going to come with different personalities. So you want to figure out how to make those personalities work really well together, and make it so that your team is really all on the same page.
Yeah.
And one other thing I was, especially in practices, I think especially in the medical field, people don't realize that every single person on your team is actually kind of a salesperson. They're a marketer and they're a salesperson. So, and for clinicians, I mean, I know I'm a nurse. I like to just give everything away, be kind. Sales is kind of like icky to me, sort of foreign. But the bottom line is that sales is a part of every one of those positions, and trying to build that in, as well as having a cohesive team, is some of the common things that I've seen.
When you go in, do you actually do the training for them? And if so, is there like a common type of training, or do you recommend it? Or is there maybe a checklist that you use when you go in to do sort of a diagnostic of where they're at and suggestions on how they can best grow, maybe based on the team that they have or they're set up?
Sure. Well, most of the time, I end up being brought in first for strategy in terms of how to grow their practice. And
Okay.
so we start from a broader perspective, and we see what is it that you're offering right now? What is it that you're missing? Is it marketing? Is it retail? Is it medical weight loss? Is it surgical weight loss? Is it your educational programs? What is it that you currently offer? And then what is it that you're not offering that could really benefit your patients and your bottom line? And what happens is, as a byproduct of that, it all starts to go back to the team, because all your marketing efforts, everything goes back to the team. So I'm usually brought in more as a strategist and somebody to help them build marketing campaigns and kind of build and add on retail and add all these things into their practice, do a little facility planning. And then most of the time what happens is you start out with, like, I've got this great team, everything's going great, and you notice that there's conversions that are being missed. And so you'll find that patients will be falling off, like they may be coming through, but yet they don't convert to the next phase. And so that's really more where that diagnostic comes in. And then I do more of an assessment about, where might that breakdown be occurring. And I don't typically do the training for that. I can make recommendations for that, but I usually deal more with the retail and building your practice part of it. But the staff is an integral part of that. So then I would use outside sources, or see the strengths of their administrator or their manager, and see if they're able
Mm-hmm.
to help work somebody like yourself in from the outside, or somebody else that can help with that sort of a thing.
Beautiful.
So usually those things, they come up as a byproduct of what my original purpose is.
Got you. You know what I like about what you do, again, just to draw the web line or the similarity, that I think every, not just a practice, but every trade, every industry can apply what it is that you just said. And what I heard you say, and please clarify when I'm paraphrasing, but is to first draw the line of where we are and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And then I heard you say you kind of step back and see what's working and not working, and then look at where those gaps are, and then put strategies in place. But the key thing I heard you say was it all does come back to the staff. So whether the staff is capable, whether they are the right staff with the right behaviors that are aligned, or if they're going to be able to take on this new product that or service that is willing to be offered, that it still stems back from them. So I think that whether you're running an entire company or an individual department, that root cause analysis that you described is probably important and could be applied literally across any type of industry. And I love that. Is that
Right.
kind of your step or your process, or can you tell the viewers as we start to wrap up, maybe your 1, 2, 3, maybe top 5 things that they should look at, again, regardless of whether they are a practicing service like your expertise is in, but any industry or department? Is there like a top 5 tips you could give to look at to get started when they're trying to figure these things out?
When they're trying to figure out their office flow
Yeah.
or practice.
Yeah, if there's growth,
Yeah.
if they're
Yeah.
missing something, if their staff is aligned.
Well, I'm going to start with something that they shouldn't do, just because.
Beautiful.
But that is, I don't know, but when I go into places and we're talking about adding something new and different, they're creating, anytime there's change, people get really anxious about that. And so one of the first things that happens is they may try to fight that change. And sometimes the management staff or those that are in charge, their first response is, let's add more staff. because I don't want to stress these people out. I want to make sure that I have enough staff to support the new service. So I guess some of my tips would be, number one, don't just automatically add people, because sometimes and most of the time, actually, that's not what's really necessary right away. And it's one of those things you have to introduce whatever the change is, and then see how that's reacted. So that's probably one of the things. It's not to just automatically jump to, I need more people, I need more people. Because that's what you're going to get from the front line. It's like, I'm already busy with what I've got going. I can't possibly do that. So that's probably one thing. Then the next thing I would say is, I've found that it's very helpful to challenge your staff with an outcome versus a task. So if you're introducing something new, talking to them about the outcome, and what I've found is that actually staff appreciate that, and it gives them responsibility.
Yes.
And so they're much more likely to really put some thought into how we're going to make this work in the best possible way. And if I'm tasked with adding this new service or increasing revenue by this certain amount, then they get really creative, and you kind of can step out of the way and see what comes from that. So first, not putting, like I mentioned, not throwing staff at. Second is challenging them outcomes versus a task. And then the other thing is just making sure that you're working with the staff together and that they have buy-in from the beginning. And I guess I'm preferring a lot to change, but making sure that you involve the team in terms of so they can make some decisions about how this is going to roll out. And obviously, you don't want to make it confusing because there's too many people involved, but people will, if they have buy-in, they're much more supportive of whatever the change is. And so I found that to be really helpful. And then to pause and really, I think, and people who are, you really need to take that time. I think most people do, but to really sit down before you even start this over and learn about what the strengths and areas for improvement are in your staff, but mostly the strengths and what their goals are. Because a lot of times you'll have somebody in a position who has no idea that they really want to be doing something that's something you would have never put as a stretch for them. So talking to them, knowing what their strengths are, what it is they want, and then helping them get there. So knowing your staff really, really well in that way is helpful too, because then you can position them in terms of where all the different needs are going to be. That's probably another thing that I found to be really helpful, and to do that at least once a year. You can do it during performance appraisals or however. And then another thing is I found is helpful to develop contracts instead of position descriptions, so to speak.
Love that.
So that you know that they have sort of a contract there, and with that, these are the set expectations of everyone who works here. These are the ones specific to your job, and you kind of do it as a contract so they understand exactly what's expected of them, and verbalize that or write it out in outcome perspective versus just a task. Because that way, you recognize the maturity of your staff, you challenge them, and it's amazing how they will rise to the occasion. Even people who think there's no way that could happen, they rise to the occasion, because if they know the culture and they know the vision that you have, they want to do well. Nobody wants to go into their job and do crappy. They want to do a good job. So anything you can do to help them do a good job will really improve your overall organization and makes everybody involved look like more of a rock star for sure.
I love all of that. I think my favorite is the outcome. I love how you phrase that. It gives it a whole new perspective and makes that change, less scary. So I definitely love that. And I love the contract versus the job description piece. It sounds so much more like a two-way street when you have an agreement. I love that. Those are great. Those are great.
Goes back to the Michael Gerber days, with the EMS, that sort of thing, I guess, as an entrepreneur. But even in terms of like a couple of examples, I know in our retail store, I just get goals in terms of revenue, and the staff comes up with the most awesome ways to meet that, and they get this number in their head, and then they want to beat it. So they get all charged up about it. Yeah. And that works really well. Or recently we do we've done some lipo B complex injections. And the Board of Pharmacy changed all their rules and regulations. So rather than going the old, we would go in and I'd figure it all out, and I'd go dictate how to do it. But I had a front desk person who did all the injections, and I said, "Can you do this?" She was like, "Me? I get to do that?" And she developed the whole system, put it all in place, did beautiful. And so it saved me time, and it also improved her buy-in and just her whole feeling of self-worth and and her ability as an employee. And then the last thing I guess too is everyone's rewarded or feels rewarded in different ways. So whether it's a thank you, whether it's a bonus, however they're figuring out how they're motivated. It's kind of like the 5 love languages, but it's related to business as well, in terms of what people are motivated by. And so knowing that and then being really fair for everybody. So that's probably the other thing when they fly for vacation, making sure that they understand what a difference they made. And so helping to take those concepts and put them into a variety of practices, it can really make the difference between going to a job that you love and adore and one that you kind of tolerate or one that you dread.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the optimal engagement that you're describing, the seen, valued, and heard. And I love that you do it through the behavioral side. So, obviously a predictive index user, lover, a consultant of it. And you just talked all of my behavioral love languages through the predictive index piece. It's so true, asking. People just want to be asked sometimes, and we think that they don't, and we think they're disengaged, and it's just that we're not asking people to step up. And I couldn't agree with you more. People do want to be asked, and they do want to be engaged. They don't want to come to a job they don't like. So I love that.
Right.
You have given a wealth of information to the viewers today. A couple of things. Number one, I want to know, how can they reach you the best, easiest way? And then number two, why don't you rattle off your books or your recent book or however you want to do it. And then we'll put a wrap on today's session. So how can they find you?
Terrific. The easiest way to find me is just via email. My name is Karol with a K, Karol, at weightlosspracticebuilder.com. My website is weightlosspracticebuilder.com. And I also, on the side, I love publishing. I have a separate corporation called Your Bestseller Book, but it's a lot of fun. But one of the things I found, it helps people grow their businesses. But the books that I've actually written and that have been published all went to #1, involve mostly, one's the 5 profit engines of a successful bariatric surgery practice. I just launched one last week called How to Add Medical Weight Loss to Your Practice. Beautiful. And all of them have a little bit of components about practice management. Also one actually called Your Bestseller Book. And then the other 2 are marketing books. They're all on Amazon. And if you just look up my name, Karol with a K, middle initial H, Clark, they all kind of come up. So
beautiful.
Yeah. So I love it. A lot of fun for me.
Thank you for being a guest today. Again, I want to preference our stress rather, that regardless of what type of business you're in, the things that you mentioned today, the tips, the outcomes, the focus on the staff are applicable regardless of whether you're a 2-man shop or several thousands of employees and departmentalized and different affiliates. Those basic concepts of understanding where we are, where we want to go, what are the opportunities to get there, and involving the team are critical regardless. And I love how you articulated that, especially with the outcomes piece. So my name is Shelley Smith. Thank you, Karol Clark, for joining us today on the Culture Hour. And we'll be having more guests, as well as Elizabeth and I coming back together to talk about the most recent National SHRM conference that was in Chicago in 2018, just last month or few weeks ago. Until then, peace out. My name is Shelley Smith, the founder of Premier Rapport and one of your hosts for the Culture Hour. Until then, remember, culture matters.
Thanks so much.